Hi, everyone. You just did your discussion board on Heclo and Hyperdemocracy, and there's too much to cover. This video would be 20 minutes long. So I'm going to focus on what I think many of you focused on, which was information and information in the digital age. And I'm going to add some elements of social media because there's psychological impacts. You know, politicians are people. So we have more information now right at our fingertips than humans have ever had, ever. Like the amount of information we have, we're nearly omniscient compared to previous humans. So that's pretty wild. But most people's understanding of most things is really shallow, right? Because we live on TikTok clips. We live on very short clips of information. We watch short clips of news. Now that's gotten better. With the rise of independent media, we can see long-form discussions. We can see people talk for an hour or at least 15 minutes and present an idea. Have a bit more of a nuanced conversation than you've got 3 minutes and there's going to be two people yelling at you. Make your point. So we have lots of information, but we don't have a very deep knowledge. I would say that education in America right now is not doing so well for a host of reasons. Media is a part of it, but that's not the only thing. When it relates to the democracy or to our governmental system, I think we have a bit of an ignorant voter base, but we have a highly motivated voter base, right? People don't know a lot, but they're very motivated by what they perceive as the other side being bad guys doing bad things. That hasn't changed really so much in the history of voting in the United States. There were knockdown, drag out fights where they're the bad guys. And, that's been happening for a long time, well before social media in general. But what does happen is you've got massive knowledge, massive access to information with very shallow understanding, which creates an uninformed voter base with a distinct lack of wisdom, which is unfortunate. Won't be going away anytime soon. When it comes to the behavior of politicians, well, politicians are just like the rest of us. Only the average politician is probably slightly more narcissistic than your average voter. Otherwise, not that different. And certainly not any smarter. Imagine you're a politician, so you think you're great because you think you're smart enough and good enough to lead other people and be in charge. That's why you ran for the job. So politicians, I think, innately have to have a certain sense of arrogance, self-confidence. Let's put it that way. Let's be at least somewhat generous. They're very self-confident. They know what they're doing, and their convictions are good convictions. If you've got a microphone or a camera in front of your face all the time, the chance that you're going to say something stupid goes up exponentially. Unfair, but that's the reality of it. Then you enter social media into it, and what you get is the need to be relevant, which many of you pointed out as being the loudest and the first to say a thing. Certainly not the best way to generate knowledge or to come to conclusions. And so I think politicians are as susceptible, if not more susceptible, to that negative aspect of social media and technology than the average person, probably more so. Then you have this other element where social media really creates a lot of problems for us. It's not that social media doesn't make people dumb. That's maybe it does, but that's not the point. It creates an environment in which we're not really sure if what we're hearing is true. So let's take some of what you wrote. You have things that are fact, right? Who, what, when, where. Why is squishy. Who, what, when, where. Those are the things that are objectively true about a thing that can happen. Then you have opinion, editorial, right? People's perspectives or interpretations about these factual things. Now, for anyone and at any time, it is difficult sometimes, and sometimes it's intentional, to distinguish what is the opinion from what is the set of facts. That's even harder to do nowadays because there's more effort put into obscuring the line between the two. So I think many of you are right to point that out. But then, well, it's okay. So now you've got this intermingling of fact and opinion. And so what do? Well, maybe you go to several different news sources to try to get a well-rounded picture. It's like, okay, well, of the 4 things that I covered, these are the 3 elements that maintain between all of the stories. That probably is true. The rest of this stuff is debatable. That's a lot of work. And most people don't want to do that. But on top of that, there are just outright false things out there in the ecosystem for us to consume. Trump called it fake news. Fox, MSNBC, CNN, these are all good examples. These 24-hour news cycles, right? That in and of itself, as he pointed out, is a problem. But let's set it aside. Those interests, right? Whether it's Rupert Murdoch of Fox News, and I don't remember who's in charge of MSNBC and CNN, but they have the same types of, big money people with their preferences and their biases for what is covered and not covered. So that, are they lying? Sometimes outright lies, yes, but not so often. What usually happens is they will tell a story from this perspective, or they'll tell this part of a story, but they will very intentionally leave this part of the story out. They'll do these different types of things to obfuscate, but not outright lie, not most of the time. This makes it very hard, right, to know exactly what is true and not true. Not the postmodern sense, but just in understanding, getting all the pieces of information together so you can see the whole picture. This is a big problem. So now we, living right now, are confronted with a crazy amount of information with all these different perspectives, some of which are skewed heavily. And an increasing amount of this is just false. And we won't even get into the AI problem because it's for another discussion. But I think that's what a lot of you are concerned about, and a lot of you spoke about. Politics is always kind of a mess because it's about compromise. Social media and the modern media landscape makes compromise between politicians much more difficult. Part of this goes back to the late 90s and the party purification under Clinton as the president and Newt Gingrich as the Speaker of the House. Prior to that, it was actually much more common to have left-leaning Republicans, right-leaning Democrats. They would duke it out on the floor of the House and Senate, and then they would go have drinks afterwards. And that was good. It was normal. That doesn't work so much anymore. Can you honestly see AOC and Marjorie Taylor Greene can you see them having a drink and just like laughing right in the corner of a bar somewhere, or Josh Hawley and Chuck Schumer? It often is beneficial in the media to portray politics as like terribly contentious because it's interesting and it's exciting and it's a little scary, and that draws our interest, participation, whatever, engagement. But more and more, it seems that social media is making it very hard for politicians to do that sort of thing, to come together on the outside and just be normal humans together. And that's an issue that we're going to see. And I think it may actually get worse as the boomer generation moves out of political power and younger generations move into that are much more consistently keyed into social technology on the average. I think that it's going to be, that's my prediction, but I'm not entirely sure. We're going to see that it's much harder for the left and the right to find compromise and to just see commonality as hey, you're a person, I'm a person. We have human things we can talk about. We have outside interest in sports or otherwise that we can, art, music. I think that's going to be harder and harder to achieve. Though, when Trump eventually moves out of the picture, after his term is over, or if his health fails him. Will that open the door to consensus where he was this unique dividing figure? Maybe. I hope that opportunity exists, but we'll see. Anyway, those are thoughts on Heclo's Hyperdemocracy, and I'll have more for you in the coming weeks. Yeah, we got a couple weeks left.